Alright, so we're in the one categorical variable part 1 notes. So in the previous set of notes in our who, what, when notes, we talked about two different types of variables, quantitative variables and categorical variables. As you can tell from the title of the notes, we're going to just focus on categorical variables for a while. So the first thing we need to remember is what is a categorical variable. So if you remember, this is just a variable whose responses consist of categories. So we think about some examples that we talked about for that. Gender was one, so if you're male or female, your major fell in that category. But numbers could also fall as a categorical variable depending upon what kind of number it was. So for example, an area code, even though it's a number, tells you geographic location. So it was technically a categorical variable. So now remember what a categorical variable is, we're going to talk about appropriate ways to display that graphically. So the two different types of plots we're going to talk about for a categorical variable you've probably seen before. We're going to talk about pie charts and bar plots. And so for this, we're going to be using StatCrunch, because we're not going to create the graphs by hand. So one thing that I try to do is any data set I use in class, I try to put on Blackboard for you as well. Under your course documents, there's a data folder. I already had it here. And inside that data folder, the very first one you should see will be the party data set. So if I open that data set, this is what my data set looks like. So I have the person's party, the Republican, Democrat, or Independent, and then I have their gender as well. So both of those fall, of course, into categorical variables. And then I'm going to pull up my StatCrunch. So you're going to log into your StatCrunch if you haven't already. And then under the My Data, I'm going to select a file on my computer. Now before I can do that, I need to take this data set I opened and save it somewhere. So I can save it to my desktop, I can save it to like a flash drive that I have. Just make sure you save it to a location that you will remember. So I click on my load a file from my computer. And then I can just browse to see wherever I saved my file. And then what you'll see is you'll see like a little snapshot of what the data looks like, which is nice. You can make sure it sort of will load correctly. So while I'm waiting for that, you can name the data set if you would like. Something besides what's already labeled there. You can add a picture or something if you want, but nothing else you really have to do. I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here and hit load file. And it's going to bring up a new StatCrunch window that has my data already loaded into it. Right, and so we have our data set loaded. Now, I also try to give directions, even though like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory, of StatCrunch directions inside the notes. So we've got the data loaded. Now I'm going to choose the graphics option, and then I'm either going to choose bar plot or pie chart, depending upon which one is the one I want to create here. So I'm going to go to graph, so I can choose pie chart. Now, when I actually have the data loaded, I'm going to choose the with data option. I'll also show you what a summary option would look like as well. I'm just going to click the variable I want the plot for, and kind of scroll down here. I can put a title on this, so I can just say party affiliation, and hit compute. So I get my pie chart. And then if I look at the pie chart, things are labeled here over on the side, so I have my colors labeled, and then I'm given two numbers as well. So the first number, like the 64, would be the count. So I had 64 Democrats. That what requires about 54.7%. So that's how those two numbers will match up. So for each one, I'm given the count, the number, as well as the percentage to go along with that. What a summary would look like instead Suppose I didn't have all of my data already in a nice little Excel spreadsheet, and all I had was the count. So I'm going to label, so I have Democrats, I have Independents, and I have Republicans. And then I just have, well, I have 64 Democrats, 12 Independents, and 41 Republicans. So having the summary, instead of having like this list of all the parties, I just have the count in each group. And then when I do my graph pie chart, I would just choose the summary option instead. And I'll be using this. So my categories are going to be in this party one listed here. And then my counts are in what I've labeled as my count column there. And so you'd get the same graph. Same idea for a bar plot. I just choose the bar plot option instead. Same other two options you have. There's a couple of extra things that you can do here for type. So type, there's a frequency, a relative frequency, and a percent. That's probably the three that you would do. So let's kind of look at the differences between them. So frequency, I like to put the value above the bar because that makes it a little bit easier to see here. So frequency just gives us, notice the counts. So there were 64 Democrats, 12 Independents, 41 Republicans. If I change that to relative frequency, what that means is I take the count over the total. So there was a total of 117. So if I take 64 divided by 117, I get the 0.547, 0.103, and 0.35. You can notice how that actually compares. Those are just the numbers that we're getting over here. You notice look very similar to these percentages that we had here. And so obviously if I change this one to percentages instead, I get those numbers that I see very similarly. They're just rounded to one decimal place instead. So that's how we get our different types of graphs for categorical variables. So here there's the two examples. There's the frequency and the relative frequency one. So now we know how to graphically display them. How can we numerically display a categorical variable? Which at first that sounds a little weird. I'm going to numerically describe a categorical variable. But a numerical display is looking at the entire data set, not just an individual. So if I have all my people in front of me, how can I numerically display what's going on? So that's where we just do counts or percentages, which are the exact same numbers that you just saw. So for our example, we're going to use these numbers here from this pie chart that we have there. So of our total, so we can say if I look at my total, I add up that 64, 12, and 41, I get 117. So of our 117 that were sampled, we found that 64, or we could say 54.7% were Democrats. We found that 12, or 10.26%, were Independents. And of course the rest, 41 or 35.04% were Republicans. You'll notice how StatCrunch defaults to putting things in alphabetical order, so that's why it's Democrats, Independents, and then Republicans. Alright, so we just had a kind of a little quick idea of what's going on. Let's look at the full example. So it says here where we're interested in looking at the party affiliation of people in northern Kentucky due to the upcoming May election. In order to do this, we sent a survey to 117 registered voters in northern Kentucky in April of 2017 and asked for their party affiliation and their gender. And here I have gender summarized over here for us as well. So we're going to go kind of back to the idea of the who, what, when notes and answer some questions. So what is our goal? The goal here is really just to determine the party affiliation for the upcoming election. So who is our population? So who is the entire group of people that we are interested in studying? So we kind of go back up here. We're trying to determine party affiliation of people in northern Kentucky. In order to have a party affiliation, you need to be a registered voter. So this would be our registered voters in northern Kentucky. Versus who are we sampling, who are we actually collecting data on. So we're just getting 117 registered voters in northern Kentucky. So kind of going back to our who, what, when notes, would our sample you think represent our population? Well, we're interested in all registered voters. We're sampling 117 registered voters in northern Kentucky. So even though you might not like that it's not a very big sample, it's not really biased in any way that I know right now, right? So it seems like it's a representative sample of our population. Now our variables. Remember, the variables are the information you record on an individual. So if I have a registered voter in front of me, what information am I collecting? So I'm getting their party, which happens to be a categorical variable, as well as getting their gender, which is also a categorical variable. What do I know about when and where? I know it's at least in April of 2017. And I at least know that the people were in northern Kentucky, but I wasn't really given anything more specific about that. Now the quick summary. So quick, again, might not necessarily be quick to you, but I'm just basically going to take my two pie charts and summarize them. Now from a general standpoint, when I ask you to summarize a variable, I don't need both the counts and the percentages. However, which number do you think is easier for people to understand? Okay, for most people, percentages we like a lot better because they're always out of 100%. If I say this is 64, you kind of have to do the math yourself to understand how big that is. So generally, if we're only going to do one, prefer to do the percentages. So now my summary. So of our 117 northern Kentucky registered voters sampled. So notice now I can be pretty specific about who my population is now that I know. We found that 54.7% were Democrats. So that's not wanting to stay there, so I will go on to the next line with that. %.26% were independents. And our rest, the 35.04% were Republicans. So we've already really said that, I'm just sort of reiterating everything together here. Now we'll talk about gender. We also found so 43.59% were female. While the rest, which of course there's only two categories here, but I'll go ahead and say that number is 56.41% were male. Just a very quick way of summarizing a categorical variable. So in this video, we talked about how to numerically display a categorical variable using a pie chart or bar plot created in StackCrunch. We talked about how to numerically describe it with either a count or a percentage, where we prefer percentages overall, as well as kind of a little review of some of the who, what, when definitions that we have.